Man, my heart is so pumping from that finish. Ooh, tell you what, Southern 500, you do not disappoint. Yo, what's up everyone? My name is Jett. Welcome back to an episode of MDK Racing Victory Stop, recapping one wild Southern 500. Completely flipped over the playoff grid once again. This race started out already chaotic. On lap 2, I mentioned in the pre-race show, all Martin Truex Jr. needs to do, just have a clean, smooth race. Don't get into any issues. Just have a clean race. What does he do on lap 2? He goes 3 wide with, I think, him, Ryan Blaney, and William Byron. He slides up, makes contact with Byron, overcorrects it, and just takes himself and Ryan Blaney out in the process. And by lap 3, both Blaney and Truex, who had a 58-point gap, out of the race. Truex would finish second to dead last. Blaney would finish in dead last. But after that, things kind of mellowed out. Bubba Wallace, the pole sitter, led until lap 35 when the first round of pit stops came in. Kyle Larson overtook him, and Larson had the fastest car of the race. He won stage 1 and stage 2. Now, you did have some contenders, like you had Denny Hamlin, who tried using different pit strategy by staying out a lot longer to get the advantage on the back end on much fresher tires, even though he would have more spots to gain. But really, Larson seemed to be the only guy that was just out there. No one could touch Larson. He was that far ahead. So the main battle, of course, was between the 23 and the 17. Truex, because of Buescher, how his day went, Truex was still able to barely make it in on points. Bubba Wallace, on the other hand, after the first 2 stages, he had 11 points, while Chris Buescher only had 1 point. So there was about a 10-point gap between the two heading into the final stage. And that was the main topic on that final stage, was the 23 and the 17. Different pit strategies. You had a situation where Bubba was eating away at Buescher's lead. Buescher was falling back. Bubba was gaining forward. And then a caution come out with 53 laps to go, and Bubba stayed out. Buescher and a whole bunch of other drivers, including Kyle Busch, Chase Briscoe, and all of those, they decided to come in for tires, and they got the jump ahead on the rest of the field, and Buescher started to gain ground. Bubba started to lose ground. And there was even a moment on a restart where Buescher and Todd Gillen made contact off of turn number 2, and Buescher, I don't know, looked like he was just trying to control the car. You can make an argument for that, or he tried to maybe come down and take out Gillen. I don't know. You can make an argument for both cases, but I think it was too iffy to make like a call from NASCAR to determine whether or not it was reckless or not. I don't know. To me, it fell on the line of, yeah, it could be, but it could also just him trying to save the car. So I didn't really take issue with that. But still, somehow Buescher was able to continue, and when he came onto pit road, like I said, he got new tires. Wallace stayed out, and Buescher started eating away at Wallace's lead, and another caution came out, that being with 31 laps to go for debris. Buescher was right behind Bubba, so they were like, I think, 12th and 13th when that caution came out with around 31 laps to go. But there was also another contender in the mix, and that was Kyle Busch. I mentioned he was one of those drivers that came onto pit road. He had just his car lit up. He was not a factor the entire race. Wasn't even in the top 10, maybe even outside the top 15 for a good portion of the race. And in the closing laps, he went from 11th up to 5th like that with those new tires. And then the big turning point in the race came on that restart after that caution came out for debris. Josh Berry makes a very aggressive, unnecessary move on the front straightaway to split the middle 3 wide between Ty Gibbs and Denny Hamlin. And you can't go through out at Darlington. Doesn't work. Berry just then takes himself and Ty Gibbs out, collecting William Byron in the process. I think Daniel Suarez and Noah Gragson runs into the back end of Bubba Wallace, taking Bubba Wallace basically out of playoff contention in the process. Buescher, though, was far behind enough where he was able to keep going, didn't hit anything. But right before that happened, with 26 laps to go, Chase Briscoe, I mentioned him, who had new tires. He was up there in the mix for virtually the entire race. He started, I think, in 3rd place. He was in the top 10 for the entire race, but in those closing laps, he was really the only driver that seemed to take the fight to Kyle Larson. And on that back straightaway, he made an unbelievable pass, going from 4th to 1st. Took a 3 wide entering turn 3 and dove into the corner on Ross Chastain, who stayed out on that previous caution, got up alongside and passed him to take the lead. He went from 4th to 1st in 1 corner. Absolute incredible move by the 14 car. And then after the Berry incident, Kyle Busch then had a flyer. He came on the pit road one more time for a fresh set of tires, and he was on an absolute flyer, went from 7th to 2nd, I think, in about 1 or 2 laps. And all of a sudden you had this realization that, oh my God, Kyle Busch, is he really going to do this? Is he really going to go in a must-win situation, win? And I must say, NBC, they did a fantastic job. Lee Diffie especially, again, 2 weeks in a row, just called this race beautifully. How NBC, Lee Diffie, Jeff Byrne, and Steve Letarte called that race. The camera angles that they used was incredible, was on point. But the battle between Briscoe and Busch was so good in those closing laps. Busch had the fresher tires, but you knew he had to catch him quick, because if not, those tires were going to equal out and Briscoe was able to stay ahead. But Busch was ever so slightly just eating away, getting closer and closer and closer and closer, and was within striking distance on the final lap. He was right there. But Briscoe somehow managed to hold off the 2-time champion and was able to hold on to win the Southern 500, snapping a plus 90 race winless streak, I believe, going back to Phoenix in March of 2022 for his 2nd career Cup Series win. And most importantly, in Stewart-Haas Racing's final season in NASCAR, he takes the number 14 team to the playoffs. Here's a look at the race results here. So Chase Briscoe wins. 2nd place is Kyle Busch. Oh, so close for that A car. Unfortunately, for the first time since I believe 2012, Kyle Busch will not contend for a championship. Christopher Bell in 3rd, Larson in 4th. After the amount of laps that he has run, once again fails to capitalize. Larson finishing in the 4th position. Ross Chastain rebounds after what seemed to be he didn't have a top 10 car, was able to use strategy to his advantage to finish in the 5th position. Buescher in 6th, Denny Hamlin in 7th, Logano a quiet 8th place, as well as Corey LaJoie. Shocking to see him up there in 9th, and Tyler Reddick in 10th. But most importantly with Tyler Reddick, he is a regular season champion, winning by just 1 point, but he had one hell of a day, not in a good way, because he was, quote, throwing up and pooping himself in the race car. Almost had a Tony Stewart 2004 type of moment, I thought it seemed, because he also had a real fast car in the beginning, but he was just not well at all. But Reddick still was able to salvage a top 10 finish. 11th place is Chase Elliott, 12th is Priest, 13th is Cindric, Keselowski and Dillon rounds out the top 15 with Bubba Wallace. Pole he started in, but with that crash ends up in 16th place with Todd Gillen, Daniel Suarez, Alex Bowman, and Ty Gibbs, the top 20. Some other notables there like William Byron, who was caught up in that crash with Josh Berry in 30th, Berry 31st. Carson Hocevar started in 2nd but had multiple issues, finishes 33rd. And then you see Martin Truex Jr. and Ryan Blaney finishing 36th and 37th. But here's a look at your 16 drivers that will contend for the NASCAR playoffs. Here's a look entering into Atlanta for round number 1 of the playoffs. Kyle Larson plus 35, Bell plus 27, Reddick plus 23, Byron 17, Blaney 13, and Denny Hamlin at plus 10. And then Chase Elliott plus 9, and Brad Keselowski with plus 3. Logano and Cindric teammates plus 2 apiece, Daniel Suarez at plus 1, and Alex Bowman in a 3-way tie with Briscoe and Burton holds the final spot currently at the moment. Briscoe and Byrne, the first 2 out, and Ty Gibbs and teammate Martin Truex Jr. both sitting at -1 apiece. My thoughts on this race. I'll be honest, it was the first 2 stages of the Southern 500 from an on-track perspective was quite dull. The strategy was very interesting, but the on-track racing was kind of dull. But at the same time, it was expected. Usually with the Southern 500 as of late, it gets real intense in the closing laps. And stage 3 was a phenomenal stage. A great racing, great excitement, storylines. And again, I gotta give a tip of the hat to NBC. How they call that race, just like last weekend at Daytona. They called it, covered it beautifully, I thought. I thought it was great coverage overall from NBC, from the cameras to the reporters to the commentary. I thought it was all an amazing, amazing job. And I would also argue this. My eyes, I like Darlington more than Daytona as a regular season finale because it's a real race. I know last weekend at Daytona with Harrison Byrne winning, yeah. But to me, it felt more rewarding because if you're going to make the playoffs, to make the playoffs by winning at the toughest track in all of NASCAR at Darlington, in my eyes, is much more rewarding than Daytona because Daytona is a crapshoot. But Darlington is still a real true driver's racetrack. And how Chase Briscoe drove that 14 car, having to hold off, took the lead by storm on Kyle Larson, Ross Chastain, and having to hold off a 2-time champion like Kyle Busch. you got to give nothing but props to that 14 crew, and specifically Chase Briscoe. He is going to be one hell of a driver when he goes to the 19 ride next year at Joe Gibbs Racing. But I feel like the Southern 500 is the best track, is the best race for the regular season finale. It still brought in a ton of excitement. I mean, I don't know. Did it bring the same excitement as Daytona last weekend? It still brought excitement, but it was a different type of excitement because this was really who's the best driver. Where Daytona, like what we saw with Harrison Burton, is kind of like not who's the luckiest, but who can place themselves in position the best. But tonight at Darlington was who was the best driver, who was able to get the best out of their car, and that was Chase Briscoe that night. So I don't know. Me personally, I know Daytona is going to be back as a regular season finale next year, but I would not mind at all if Darlington, the Southern 500, was a regular season finale. I don't mind it being in the playoffs, being round one, but I also do not mind it being the regular season finale because I think tonight showed that it definitely can live up to the hype. So if I were to rate this race, I would give this race about a 7 out of 10. Because the first two stages, while the strategy was interesting, the on-track product was pretty dull. Stage 3, though, was very fun to watch, which is why I give it a 7 out of 10 and not a lower score. But overall, I left satisfied, especially that final stage. That finish between Briscoe and Busch, awesome to watch. Nothing else I can say about it. We talk about some of the drivers that didn't make it. Drivers like Bubba Wallace and Chris Buescher. Both of them drove great races, especially Bubba. I felt like he drove a really, really good race, did what he needed to do. Buescher did what he needed to do. Like I said, Buescher just needed to stay within striking distance of Bubba. Bubba had the faster car, and tonight proved it. I mean, I said that Bubba was faster. He was faster than the 17, got behind on adjustments, but was still faster than the 17. But Buescher, all he needed to do was just to keep within reach of Bubba, and he'd be fine. Now, no one had Chase Briscoe winning, I don't think, so that kind of threw a wrench into everything, but it does suck because both of those drivers I felt like were more deserving of the playoffs than some of the other drivers that are fighting for a championship. So it sucks that they both couldn't be in it, but still, I mean, they both played by the system. They both all had 26 chances to win a race, especially Buescher. I mean, you look at Darlington earlier in the spring, and then the next week, Kansas. I mean, that 17 team had multiple opportunities to win that just didn't go their way. 23 Bubba Wallace. Also, they had a lot of races where they were running well, and it didn't go their way. So, I don't know. With this playoff format, you need to be good, but you also need to be very lucky. And for drivers like Burton and Briscoe, they were very lucky. Wallace and Buescher, not so much. That's it. That's all I got to say for this episode of MDK Racing Victory Stop. It's a bit shorter episode. Do not worry. I will have a video later on in the week recapping the entire playoff grid. Who do I have moving on? Who do I have being eliminated? And who I have making it to the championship for in Phoenix. As always, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more content. Let me know your thoughts on this race in the comment section down below. But until next time, my name is Jett from MDK. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.